I think at the end of the day, innovation for me is really around two things: relevance and growth. So if we as an economy in South Australia, or I as an individual, or an organisation I'm part of, want to be relevant, we need to be thinking about the problems that other people have and need to have solved. We need to be at the forefront of a conversation. We need to be breaking new ground in how we think. And so these are the things that really characterise innovation. And so it's very much about remaining relevant in a changing world. And if you're relevant, then you've got that opportunity to grow in terms of growing your learning, growing your economy, growing your revenues. So I know it's very simple, but it comes down to, for me, down to those two things. Well, I think in equal measure that you have people engaged in the idea that you're putting forward, or the particular innovation you're putting forward, but also people who, strange enough, who might be upset with you for putting that forward. One is the measure of relevance. The other is the measure of how innovative it might actually be, because usually any new innovation will tend to upset somebody with a vested interest in the old way of doing things. And it's not that there's any enjoyment in seeing people react negatively to an innovation, but it is actually a sign that you are breaking new ground and challenging convention in the way you're going about doing things. Certainly I've seen a lot of statistics coming out of the United States where it's saying that essentially innovation and entrepreneurship are the main drivers of employment growth in the US economy. If you think about what we say to our school kids or university students, people will often say, well, many of the jobs that we need to train for have not even been created yet, and that's actually just an indication of how much change is going on. So I think the first thing is employment growth. The fact that the world is changing, if you are teaching people innovation skills, instilling an innovation mindset, it means that they are able to grow with that changing future rather than becoming a victim of it. So I think that's certainly key. The next key thing really is productivity. So economies, or my simple understanding of economic growth, is that it can grow really by increasing inputs or increasing productivity. Innovation is really principally about the latter. And so the more that you can apply new models, new ways of doing things, new technologies to doing things ever more efficiently at higher quality levels, it's going to be a key driver of productivity in an economy. My first view on that would be that the lines between those sectors are continually blurring. And so certainly in my day job, there are many things that you have all three players working together very seamlessly in teams in a way that you wouldn't have seen before. So the most important thing, I think, first of all, is to recognise that they will remain as sectors, but they will become increasingly collaborative and working together and solving problems. And so I think that in government, being innovative and having innovative people in government is very important to be able to be a good partner with others. I think also too it's very important from the point of view of, if you're going to promote innovation, ask the economy to be more innovative, the government needs to role model that. And I think it's something where people do read those signals. They may not say it, but they actually do read that. And so in a sense, government that's not being innovative is putting a kind of a glass ceiling in some respects on what they can expect from the people they're working with. I think thirdly, a lot of great innovation actually comes out of government originally. It's not often credited with that afterwards, but Silicon Valley, its genesis was very much in the government sector. A lot of the world's great technologies, even the internet, arise out of government-funded R&D. And so as that sort of lead investor or facilitator, it has an absolutely critical role to play, and that will influence both industry and the social sector. There's a functional element to that and a soft element, if I can put it that way. So functionally, I think the best articulation I've heard is from Gary Hamel, who describes innovation as a marketplace between ideas, talent and capital. And that thought is true at an economic level or at the level of a region, like a Silicon Valley, but it's also true inside a company. So a 3M or a GE or whatever that company might be, even a Cooper's Brewery or a South Australian business of some description. You've got those three elements and they're trying to find each other and match each other in the best way possible. The best ideas and insights with the best available talent and the money required to actually take that out to the market. So that would be the first functional element that's very important, if you like, a market for those three things. And secondly, you need some kind of ecosystem in which they can find each other and connect. So there's some way to make known what those opportunities are and invite people to connect up into those. Then the soft element is really around culture, and pretty much any study that you see on trying to encourage innovation within a corporation or an organisation, culture is the number one element that's identified. If you don't have a culture that values innovation, values smart risk-taking, that doesn't, even to an extent, reward failure, as long as it's smart failure, you'll have people behaving in a very different way. And even though this is very soft, it is probably the key driver. And so if you have an environment like a Silicon Valley where there's a bit of a culture of, for example, give before you get. So the expectation is if you're going to be a member of this community, you need to contribute, you need to be open, you need to be sharing ideas, and that's your ticket for entry. And if you start exhibiting those behaviours and everyone else does as well, well then opportunities multiply for everybody. I would put two lenses on this. So I think the first thing that's very important is to be our authentic selves, if I can put it that way. So it's all very well, and it is a useful exercise to look at other cities and other economies and see what they're doing and pick the best of that and want to emulate that. It's a very natural thing to do. But I don't think there's any point trying to be something we're not, or we don't have the competency to do that. It's not in our history, it's not in our nature to do certain things. So I think that the first thing is be true to who we are, because there's plenty of opportunity to innovate within that the world also needs. So that could be at a sectoral level, so let's innovate around wine or agriculture or whatever that might be. Let's innovate around something that's a legitimate part of our history and DNA. So that could be areas like social innovation, where we have something we already value, already have track record in. Or it could be something around geography, so water scarcity, those sorts of things. So I think that as long as we're innovating in areas where we've got genuine strengths, good story to tell, cultural heritage to draw upon, that's incredibly important. I think the other lens I would put on that is that there are all kinds of innovation, from product innovation, if you like, to social innovation. One thing I think that's very important for South Australia, and I admit bias here, is strategic innovation. So that is, I think, is a small economy at the bottom of the world, in a great place, but very removed from a lot of global markets. And in fact, even from the eastern states, we need to be thinking very differently about where our opportunities lay, and think much more creatively about how we reach markets, how we think of ourselves, who we are in relation to others, and what our unique role is in this new world economy. It's actually out of that kind of thinking that suddenly a whole bunch of new opportunities will pop up that we didn't see before. And I think the difference for us in seeing or feeling like South Australia is an opportunity-rich environment versus an environment removed from opportunity or distant from opportunity is all the difference between whether we're going to be successful in this endeavour or not. The single most important thing is what we value. So you'll get what you value. So if we say, if everyone from the Premier to the media to people in cafes are talking about and celebrating people who are innovating, innovation is seen as a viable and attractive career option alongside the professions. It's evident, I suppose, in the legends of an economy. So here we talk about the stump jump plough, and we talk about the vote for women, and these are all wonderful parts of our early history. But we kind of need contemporary examples of that we also celebrate. And when they become part of the South Australian narrative, well, here's what we value, here's what we are, and that theme of innovation goes through. And everyone from a school kid to an employee who might be leaving a large company is thinking about innovation and entrepreneurship as a viable choice and something that the community values. That's again when you'll see a significant mind shift, and that will then flow through to the economy. It's the small behaviours and small gestures that can make a big difference. So these are things like, as I was describing before in Silicon Valley, where you'll have this give before you get attitude that people demonstrate. If you have a dozen people showing that attitude, well, it makes no difference at all. Have a couple of hundred people showing that that attitude, and it will make some difference. But if that becomes a sort of a common characteristic of doing business in South Australia, give before you get, that has a massive difference on how we see things and how we view the world, and the number of opportunities that become apparent to us. That openness and willingness to share, taking the trouble to connect somebody with somebody else they might not have previously met. It's all of these connections that are really important in having people see living in South Australia as being very different from what it might be. So at the moment, a lot of those stories are around, oh, I know somebody who left and went to Sydney, or somebody who's working in Silicon Valley, and there is an almost deflating element to that. But if instead what we are doing is bringing those very same attitudes here and exemplifying them, and we can get more and more people behaving in that way, it will have a remarkable effect on how people see South Australia, the number of people who will be encouraged into innovation and entrepreneurship.